Anthropic CEO has just made a prediction that, depending on where you sit, either feels unbelievable or completely banal. Today, we're going to get into what it is and what it means. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today, we are talking about a topic that has absolutely lit up AI Twitter for the past day or so, which is a prediction from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei that AI will write 100% of code or nearly 100% of code within a year. Where this comes from is Amodei sat down at the Council on Foreign Relations for a wide-ranging interview. The discussion covered the future of AI leadership, the role of innovation in geostrategic competition, and the outlook for frontier models. Still, it was his comments about the pace of worker replacement in the tech sector that have gone viral. Dario said, "If I look at coding, which is one of the areas where AI is making the most progress, what we're finding is that we are not far from a world, I think we'll be there in 3 to 6 months, where AI is writing 90% of the code. And then in 12 months, we may be in a world where AI is writing essentially all of the code." Now, to those of you who are not using all of these text-to-code tools, it may seem completely obvious. Still, for Dario, it's a significant acceleration of the timelines that he had previously expressed. In fact, I think it's the first time, at least the first time that I've seen, that he's actually given a concrete forecast for the adoption of automated AI coding. When he was doing the interview circuit back in Davos in January, Dario only spoke in general terms about the overall workforce, for example, stating, "I've never been more confident than ever before that we're close to powerful AI systems. What I've seen inside Anthropic and out of that over the last few months led me to believe that we're on track for human-level systems that surpass humans in every task within 2 to 3 years. So what's been happening since then that might make this timeline feel like it's accelerating, at least when it comes to coding? Dario's company Anthropic is obviously a big part of this. They released Claude 3.7 Sonnet alongside their agentic coding tool, Claude Code. Both releases represent major progress for AI coding assistants. Of course, surrounding these tools, we've also seen the rise of vibe coding. This is the idea of people who were not coders before being able to use a tool like a Lovable or a Bolt to actually build applications. Got people thinking in completely new ways about what it means to build software, but also what it means to be a creator more broadly. Riley Brown, who got his start as the biggest AI TikToker, has completely shifted to building apps as a form of content. He's convinced that this is where all creators are going to head, and a few weeks ago on February 18th, he shared a Google search comparison of prompt engineering as a term versus vibe coding as a term, and said checking on this in 1 year. He then came back yesterday to show that vibe coding had actually already started to surpass prompt engineering as a search term. Riley added, "It only took 3 weeks." Very clearly then, we are in the middle of a paradigm shift for software engineering work, and it feels like somewhere along the way we might have passed an inflection point. Now, this has been a big topic in industry conversations that are going on right now. For example, the discussion about AI coders replacing human engineers was a big topic at South by Southwest, which is currently still happening down in Austin. Responding to Amodei's prediction, IBM CEO Arvind Krishna was very skeptical. He commented, "I think the number is going to be more like 20 to 30% of the code could get written by AI, not 90%. Are there some really simple use cases? Yes, but there's an equally complicated number of ones where it's going to be 0. Now, while as you'll see, I'm not sure I agree with that point, he did add something that I think is an extremely important narrative and something that you've probably heard on the show before, saying, if you can do 30% more code with the same number of people, are you going to get more code written or less? Because history has shown that the most productive company gains market share, and then you can produce more products, which lets you get more market share." This is basically a way of him saying the winners of AI will not be those who choose to do the same with less, but those who choose to do either more with the same or way more with a little more. So Arvind, if you happen to be a listener, thanks for amplifying this point. Mark Cuban had a similar take during his panel at the conference. While he didn't touch on AI coding, he made a more general point about work replacement, saying AI is never the answer, AI is the tool. Whatever skills you have, you can use AI to amplify them. And while I don't disagree with that, I think the evidence is starting to show something a little bit different. For example, back in October, when frankly coding assistants were less capable than they are now, Google CEO Sundar Pichai said during Google's Q3 earnings call, "Today, more than a quarter of all new code at Google is generated by AI, then reviewed and accepted by engineers." So if the IBM CEO is saying that it'll only be 20 to 30%, but back in October, Google was already seeing 25% of new code coming from AI, someone's going to be wrong here. From a technical perspective, one of the questions raised by Amodei's comments is what improvements do we need to see over the next 3 to 6 months to get to 90% of code being AI generated? And by extension, what are the challenges that need to be solved to get that number to 100% within a year's time? One of the big divides in this moment is the entrepreneurs and enthusiasts spinning up new products, this huge rise of vibe coders, for example, And on the other hand, the professional programmers working with enterprise code bases. Many of the current tools are unbelievably good at building prototypes, hunting bugs, letting people go from 0 to 1 really quickly. But that's not the same as being able to scale to huge enterprise code bases where lots of people have to contribute. If you go check out the Claude Reddit, for example, you can find lots of examples of struggles with situations that deal with things like multiple files across an enterprise code base. And that's without even getting into issues involving coordinating multiple engineers working on the same code base in parallel. There are also more mundane constraints in how fast this shift will happen. Milan Janan, for example, pointed out, you can't sign a contract saying your code is secure if none of your employees have read it or understand how it works. Of course, none of these issues are insurmountable. They make it more difficult to go full AI at the enterprise level, but they also create a pretty damn big honeypot for someone who wants to take on this particular set of challenges. Developer Nick Dobos wrote, "Keep seeing versions of AI coding is great until your app gets too complex for the AI to handle." Some thoughts. Code bases are going to 1000x to 1 millionx in size over the next 10 to 20 years. Keeping it all in your head will not be viable. 2, this unknown large code base is already the norm for large companies. The size, maturity, and turnover of modern companies, as well as use of libraries and packages, means huge pieces are and always will be unknown to you. You still need to be productive in this labyrinth. 3, AI coding will get more powerful, and with it, the ability for an AI to understand this labyrinth will grow. You simply need to ask for summaries and ask questions about the code as you go. Trying to keep this much info memorized in your brain will not work. 4, the number one skill of an AI programmer right now is constraining AI and providing just enough context when giving commands for the AI to do things correctly. 5, this will grow to include knowing what questions to ask your codebase so you have only enough info and context to do your tasks correctly. What's more, Siggy Bilstein, the CTO of Mazda, suggested that some amount of this may be a skill issue. He wrote, "It's absolutely insane how fast you can move in a well-structured codebase with Cursor. It is absolutely a travesty how slow it is to move in a Gordian knot of spaghetti code." And so, of course, one of the questions becomes, if AI is writing all the code, does that mean we don't have any software engineers? Dario actually addressed this in the next part of the interview. He said, "The programmer still needs to specify what are the conditions of what you're doing. What is the overall app you're trying to make? What's the overall design decision? How do we collaborate with other code that's been written? How do we have some common sense on whether this is a secure design or an insecure design? So long as there are small pieces that a human programmer needs to do that an AI isn't good at, I think human productivity will actually be enhanced." I think that's true, but I also think that when people hear statements like this, they have a tendency to lump them in together with some common tropes that you hear around AI right now. Things like AI is just going to replace the tedious tasks, or this little chestnut that you probably see on LinkedIn about 20 times a day. AI won't replace you, a person using AI will. To put my cards on the table, I think these sentiments reflect staggering amounts of cope and or not seeing where things are headed. When people who are heading these foundation labs are talking about AI being better at every task than humans in 2 to 3 years, that means every task, not just the tasks that are tedious. My base case then is that effectively 100% of the tasks, quote unquote, that we do today are going to be done by AI in the future. Where I think people lose the plot and lose the nuance here is that that does not mean a priori that jobs go away. Instead, I think that on a fundamental level, jobs change. And I think about 100% of our jobs are going to change. Simply put, we are not going to be task executors and doers in the future. People are going to be generals of their own little armies and CEOs of their own little companies, where agents and AIs are doing the tasks that they once had done themselves. The reason that I'm so bullish is that I think that all of this leads to just more being produced. Exactly what the CEO of IBM was talking about, which is a recognition that market winners always produce more and win market share by producing more better things. That's what AI is going to enable. But the path to it enabling that is going to be a complete, effective 100% replacement of the way that jobs are structured now with a totally new way of working. And by the way, from where I'm sitting, I don't think that Dario's timelines are all that crazy. Yes, I think that there are very real structural constraints and human constraints and legal constraints and inertia constraints that will slow this down in the enterprise. I think that is absolutely undeniable. But when you get outside of the enterprise sector, it is not hard to see examples of how fast this is changing. Y Combinator partner Jared Freeman recently said that 1/4 of YC founders said that 95% of their code base was AI generated. That means 1/4 of the companies that have come out of the most important accelerator in the world are seeing nearly all of their code generated by AI. Sahil from Gumroad says, "We're already at 100%. If you're writing code, you're making a conscious choice not to ask AI to write the code for you. fine, but it's a choice, similar to doing your dishes by hand instead of using a dishwasher. Like I said, I do not think that this means that all software engineers are going to lose their jobs. As Adi from Trade Your Meme put it, software engineering has never been primarily about writing code. The code is downstream to thinking precisely about how to model a particular domain. I think he's right that that's going to be an even more important skill in the future. What's more, there is also this other interesting lurking question for me, which is that if AI does write all the code, but AI remains in a place where it's not particularly good at inventing new things, it's just good at pattern matching old things, does that mean that we're going to be stuck with the programming languages we have right now in the state that they are forever? If engineers aren't in there actively working with the code, do we lose on some of that progress? Gergolio Rose writes, interesting thing, Dario's prediction will not be true for the most critical software, like Linux. There is no AI to write that code which has never been written before and needs to be as efficient as possible. So there are still interesting things to explore even in this 100% vision of the world. Anyway, I think at this point you can probably see why this has been such fodder for conversation. It is, yes, about coding, about this huge, important breakout area of AI and agent innovation, which has become even more broadly important with the rise of vibe coding, which has allowed all the people who are non-technical and non-developers to start participating in it. But it's also touching on the broader questions of job displacement more generally and how work looks in the future. Hopefully your mind's now whirring with some new thoughts. Let me know in the comments, of course, whether you think the prediction is right on, crazy, or not ambitious enough. For now, though, that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening as always, and until next time, peace